Dr. Catherine Hunt, previously financial advisor for a number of years. After progressing from that role, she wrote the textbook on ethics for financial advisors, and for the last 7 years has been an academic running the Masters of FP for Griffith University. So without further ado, Catherine Hunt.
Good morning. All of your faces are much more excited than I expected after last night's dancing and shenanigans. Great to see. So we are going to spend the next hour and 15 minutes unpacking the ethics of risk profiling. And I was thinking about this in a surfing context, as I do. Everything for me is surfing, so everything has a surfing analogy. And often we think, risk profiling, it's kind of a tick box exercise, right? Well, think about when you're doing your extreme sports. So I've been surfing for 25 years and I'm pretty good. I used to compete against Stephanie Gilmore, who was 7-time world champion. I competed against her when I was 16, so never since then. But I'm pretty good for a girl. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go surf in the gnarliest break in Mexico, which is called Puerto Escondido. It's the heaviest beach break in the world. It breaks much harder than any other beach break, something about the sand and the vibration. I thought, yeah, I'm good enough. So, I went and surfed there a few years ago, and I almost drowned. But I didn't. And why did I almost drown? Because I knew my risk profile, I knew where my tolerance level was, and I stepped out of that. I thought, you know what, I'm going to push myself for this time. And it was a great experience, almost drowning. I really recommend it. I literally do. In psychology, we say something like freedom is living your worst nightmare. Because once you've experienced that, you realise, I'm alive, how good's this? So we need to put everything in perspective. Risk profiling is the core part of financial advice, really. We need to know, just like how I needed to know where my actual skill level met my actual risk tolerance and match it nicely instead of mismatching it as I did, we also need to do that with our clients. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you. So the key lesson that we're going to get is, of course, that risk profiling is actually essential for ethics. And we're going to look at this in 3 key ways, with, of course, communication at the end. We're going to unpack risk profiling. We're going to unpack the psychological side. That's the sexy side that you guys are going to get lots of questions to do on. And then we're going to unpack the much less sexy side, which is the quantitative side. So that's risk capacity, of course, and the actual risk needed to achieve a client's goals. And we'll talk about the communication of this. And throughout this session, you're going to be thinking and referring to your own processes and probably wondering what you can do to actually improve your risk profiling processes in your own practices for your clients. So we'll also look at a little comparison of the different products that are available on the market at the moment, and that'll be fun. So when we talk about risk tolerance in general and risk profiling, generally we first off just think of, well, how much risk is our client willing to take? That's just the psychological tolerance for risk, isn't it? Nothing about their money, it's just how comfortable are they with risk. And sometimes our preconceived ideas can be incorrect. Has anyone ever heard about the really good surf in Italy? No one has heard about the good surf. You've heard about the good surf in Italy. This is me in Italy. It's not that bad there, the surf. Often, there's contradicting ideas that we have, where we have a preconceived idea about our client's risk tolerance. So let's jump into some details. This is from the Phenometrica website, fantastic risk profiling system. And what we can see from this question, you might want to do it yourself. You will want to do it yourself because it's a fun activity. And you will actually need probably pen and paper in case you've got that around or some way of taking notes, because we're going to be doing your own risk profile throughout this session. So this first question is very interesting, that I've just chosen to highlight the fact that if we ask any of our clients, what is your risk profile, they're probably going to be able to tell us. We go through this convoluted process, and I'm going to show you a very structured convoluted process. But realistically, you can ask clients something like this. This is the spectrum, this is what risk means, this is what, this risk seeking and risk avoiding, where do you sit on this spectrum? And the clients will tell you. Sorry? What does risk mean? Great question to ask your clients. What does risk mean to you? Because it means something different to everyone. And for some people, there'll be some people in this room who might not even be client-facing. You might be putting together portfolios, for example. And you might be thinking, well, in terms of the portfolios I put together, risk is a totally different thing. Risk within the portfolios is a very quantitative measurement. But we always have to construct everything with the end client in mind, because there's risk within portfolios, risk within each asset, and then there's the actual risk or volatility that a client is willing to take. So, to put this in context, we've actually got, in this session, this amazing data set that has never before seen the light of day. The Portfolio Construction Forum have been surveying practicing financial advisors, which means I'm not even eligible to do the survey because I used to be a financial advisor. That's how amazing the sample group is. And the survey's been asking lots of things, and part of it is around different risk profiling practices and beliefs that financial advisors are using. So let's see, you should all do the survey, by the way, if you can, but just to add to the body of knowledge on this. But in the meantime, let's have a little just contextual cohort analysis. So could you just write down, this isn't an app thing, there are app things as well, we're really mixing it up here with the mediums. But if you could just write down, so for the first question, for example, do you assess client knowledge and decision making? So if you do, all the time with every client, write number 7 for the first one. Second one, that should totally be I do, not a do. It's still a vowel. Do I get half marks? I do a risk tolerance survey for each goal. So again, if you do that for each goal for each client, write down a 7. The next one, do you believe that risk tolerance is stable across situations? A lot of my research is based on that exact premise. I've done a lot of research on risk profiling, and the premise is very much, if you're like me and you like going and surfing in Porto Escondido and almost dying, you probably also like investing in Nigerian oil stocks, and only that. Because it can be, according to the research. But do you think it is stable across situations? And do you think that clients know their risk tolerance? Or do you think you need to walk them through that process? Do you think you could just ask that beautiful question from Phenometrica, or do we need to walk them through the process? So 544 current practicing financial advisors have gone through this anonymous survey, and these are the results on a 7-point scale. So these are the averages, of course. Never before seen data. So if you're wondering where you sit relative to your peers in terms of your attitude towards risk profiling, this is really great insight. So have a look at what you wrote compared to the cohort, and then give yourselves a little pat on the back, because I bet that you're all really high achievers in this room. I bet you're all up on the far end of the yes, yes, yes in terms of what you're doing. I'm just assuming, just from the glow on your faces. Correct me if I'm wrong. So now we're going to use the app. It's exciting. And what we're doing with the app here is we're starting to look at a little bit more in depth within psychological tolerance for risk. So the first question is on your app. If you're an anti-app person like I am, you can write your answer down on your pen and paper. You're on a TV game show and you can choose one of the following. $1,000 in cash, walk out, thank you very much. Or 50% chance to win 5,000, which means a 50% chance to win 0. 25% chance to win 10,000, 75% chance to win 0. Or a 5% chance to win 100,000 and a 95% chance to get 0. Apologies, we're going to have a look at these results. So, where did you fit relative to your peers? Are you surprised? I'm surprised. Interesting. So in the academic literature, we have a bank of these types of questions. Often they involve gambling to see someone's psychological tolerance for risk, because you'll see me in Vegas, I go like this. Why do I have to walk through these bloody rooms to get to my actual hotel room? Past all the tables and everything, I never stop. Not interested in gambling. But at the same time, I will surf Porto Escondido and almost die willingly. I'm training to go back and I'm not going to die this time. Partner said I'm not allowed to die. So, this is an indication from one question of where you might sit in terms of your psychological tolerance for risk. And in academia, we have a pretty big bank of these questions that have been tested, validated across different samples. And a lot of them relate to gambling, but many of them relate to pure investments as well. And they're just not as sexy. That's why I didn't use them in this setting, because you guys are just drowned with investment stuff throughout every day. So from that one question, can I see a raise of hands who thinks that it was completely inaccurate in terms of where you landed in terms of conservative, moderate, or high growth? Beautiful. Beautiful. And that's fantastic. So who thought it was kind of on par? Like, yeah, not that wrong. Yep. So most of the people say, yeah, that's fine. And a lot of people said, yeah, no, it doesn't work. And this really highlights that when we're doing risk profiling in our practices, we can't just ask one question. We need a lot of data to really figure this out. And there are many components of psychological tolerance for risk which interplay with financial planning and developing strategies. Some of those are literally, as we just saw, how willing are you to play in a gambling game, that type of thing. But a lot of them are also about self-sabotage. How likely is it that your client's going to take your world's best advice, pay you for it, and then go and buy a new car that was outside of the advice? So these kind of things are also really important for understanding a client's broad profile, which will inform not only the strategy but the product recommendations. So here's our next question for the app again. We've got 3 of these all in a row. So this question, you can open up your app in theory and answer this. Is it there in the app? Excellent. And soon we're going to see the results on the screen. So the question is, I can benefit from even the most challenging life events. So you've got to pick a number between 1 and 7. Can you benefit from the challenging life events or not? Interesting. Looks like we've got some overly optimistic people in the room. Or older, and you just know. Yeah, been there, seen how we grow through it. Look at that. Absolutely an overly optimistic room. Let me psychoanalyze you. I have a background in psychology as well. I didn't get it read out because my bio is a bit much. But I'll tell you, I'll psychoanalyze you now. So for free, you're welcome. So everyone who put 5, 6 or 7, especially the 6 or 7ers, you're with me. We're the overly optimistic people. We're the entrepreneurs. We're the people who start businesses. We're the people who say, she'll be right, it'll be fine. When we go to the lawyer and the lawyer says, yeah, but it's $900 an hour for me, we say, that's fine, I'm here for a reason. Can we get to the reason or not? Can you achieve what I want to achieve? And they say, yes. We say, I don't care about the fees. We're not fee sensitive at all. We do not care about fees, overly optimistic people. We care about the vision. What are we getting from the end of this journey? Similarly, if your clients are pessimistic or low optimism, then they're going to be nitpicking. They're going to be caring about every single fee that's associated with every single thing that you're recommending, with the strategy, with the product, with everything. So it's good to know these types of things because we need to be able to give appropriate financial advice. That means it's appropriate for the person who's in front of us. And some clients will need more attention to the details of those fees. But the overly optimistic, the clients that are like us, you can just brush over that. They don't care. They want to hear about the big picture. When are we achieving our goals? How are you getting us there? Sing us the story. So overly optimistic people, as well as being entrepreneurs, we're pretty naughty, really. We're not that good at saving on group because we're like, it'll be fine. We don't need to save. We'll retire at like age 50 with $50 in the bank. We're like, it'll be fine. It'll all just be fine. That's overly optimistic people. We'll get divorced and then we'll just remarry. This one will work. This is the cold, hard data of all of us, and I'm including me in this group. Overly optimistic people, we are a nightmare, really. We think we're cool. We're like, how good's life? And our advisors are looking at us and going, oh my gosh, I am going to need to monitor you the entire time. So some of these factors, which really make up the client's profile, they influence the strategy that we recommend because you can't go to an overly optimistic client and say, everything's on track, we're going to be achieving your goals, because you'll have your quarterly review and they'll say, oh, well, yeah, we're both part-time now. Yeah, we stopped full-time work because you said it'd all be fine, right? Okay, right. So we need to know these components about our clients. We cannot give appropriate advice without knowing these details because clients will do what clients will do. You can give your advice, but if the client actually then just sabotages you along the way, there's a problem. So that's fun talking about optimism. We've got another fun one to talk about next. So again, in your polls, another self-quiz. I am prepared to spend now and let the future take care of itself. If you don't agree with that, pick one. And if you do agree, yeah, let the future take care of itself, pick 7. And this one's very much about spending. So we're going to have the results pop up here on screen any moment, and we'll be able to then, again, psychoanalyze ourselves as a group, which is always fun. And I already know what you're all going to say, pretty much, but let's see if I'm right. Oh, not as much as I expected. Okay, but still down that end, towards the disagree end. I expected everyone to be on strongly disagree, but that's good. It's nice to have a bit more of just a skewed little curve there. Excellent. So you can reflect on where you sit relative to your peers, because this is your peers in the room. This is the creme de la creme right here. So that's great. And this is actually about self-control, which is also stickability to the plan. Will the client actually do what you say for them to do or not? So those of us who scored 1 to 3, we're really highly self-control. We're the ones who go to the checkout with our groceries and we don't buy the chocolates that are right there, ever. We're like, no, I came here for this. I'm not going to be lulled into buying that. That's not what we're going to do. Low self-control people, on the other hand, will buy the chocolates at the checkout, etc. So self-control is actually the most fascinating component of your client profiling. There's research that it's actually found that self-control, or as in particular low self-control, is a better predictor of over-indebtedness than financial literacy. And there's so much chitter-chatter about financial literacy, it just about kills me. Because they're like, oh, people need to know about their money and how to manage their money. And I'm like, have you seen the research on self-control? Can we have some understanding on how to teach self-control first? Because it benefits so many areas of life. Financial literacy is fantastic, but it only benefits money. Self-control benefits so many things. And when we're doing research, we often need to use proxies because we don't know what the community's levels of self-control are. And there's one of my mentors from my PhD, he did this fascinating study in the US, and he didn't know people's levels of self-control, so he just used BMI as a proxy for self-control. It can impact so many areas of our lives. It's wild. So, in terms of financial advice, you've all had this client. You know the client. It's that advice is perfect, fantastic, thank you, please implement it, love it. And then you call them 3 months later and they say, oh, great that you called, because on the weekend we were just having a drive and we stopped by the car yard and there was this really nice guy and we got this new car. And you're thinking, that was not in the plan. In fact, that cash was there and it was set aside to be contributed to super after 30 June. And you've just spent it. And we told you what it was for, and you've just spent it. And now we have to redo the plan. And even, we're going to have to redo the plan every day, basically, and monitor you. So we need to know our clients' levels of self-control. It's part of the strategy. It's part of the recommendations that we give. So if you have a client who's high self-control, who's like everyone in this room and me, you can just tell them this is what we're doing and they will do it. They're fine. They can control themselves. But many clients have low self-control, and they are going to need advice which acknowledges their low self-control and that actually restricts them from having access to their own money, basically. So, and that's a helpful thing to do, but how do you do that in an ethical way? Of course, you can talk to a client and ask them, how's your self-control? And they'll say, terrible. Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to mail you $200 cash a week and everything else is automated and we control it. Sounds kind of like financial abuse, really. But that's actually good advice for someone with low self-control. So it's a complicated ethical situation. So there are all of these components. What we've looked at is psychological tolerance for risk. We looked at optimism, and now we're thinking about self-control and stickability. Wouldn't you like to know where your clients sit, especially on these three components? I'm sure that you would love to. Oh, my favourite person. He's the best photographer. Just wait until you see the photos he takes of you guys. It's going to be amazing. It's true, right? You know it's true. So if we wrap up the psychological tolerance for risk, we still have risk capacity and risk need to go. But we need to wrap it up with some ethical ideas. Because when we were doing these surveys before, you were doing it on your app, they're anonymous, or if you were writing it down. But you know that the person next to you may have been able to see what you put in. And anyway, you know that the data's going somewhere. So there's always going to be a little bit of not only who am I and what is my actual response, but just a little bit of, and the way that I want to communicate that I am is this. So this is social desirability bias. And it exists in every single survey. And you know that you've had clients who do this because you've talked to clients who know nothing, and when they do this, the risk profiling survey, they'll answer things like, when there's a question on how comfortable are you with this type of topic, and they'll say, yes, quite comfortable. And you're thinking, okay, yeah, you're just saying that. Because they want you to think that they're smart. So when we're actually surveying, with these type of questions anyway, social desirability comes into it again and again. We also have to consider informed consent. One of my least favourite of our 12 standards, Standard 4. I don't like how it's worded. Have a look at it and you'll probably be with me on this. Needs rewording. So informed consent is really, really important. But how do we do that within that example I was talking about before, where we need to actually, potentially, restrict our clients' access to their own funds? How do we do that? It's a game. It's a fun game, it's a balance, and it's a challenge. So another ethical avenue for us when we're talking about psychological tolerance for risk is to have that conversation continually with clients. We're in this beautiful position as financial advisors where we can ask things and raise topics that others can't. People often ask me if I'm at networking or meeting people at a barbecue, they'll say, wow, you ask these questions, no one has ever asked me that before. And I can just do a throwaway, I studied psychology, I'm allowed to. It's great. I just give myself that authority because I did study it. So similarly, you might not feel like raising with your clients their low self-control and the fact that they're spending way more than they should be. You might not want to feel like you're judging them, but you actually have the authority to do that, and maybe even the obligation to have those conversations continually. We need to consider as well, I think we've all read those behavioural finance books by now, about our rational mind and our emotional mind and how they interplay, not only for our clients but for us as well. We need to also consider how things change over time and that we shouldn't have necessarily those confirmation biases that our client was very conservative when they started being our client, so they're just conservative forever. Maybe things change through their relationship with us. Maybe we give them more confidence in their own ability to take financial risk. So that reassessment of clients needs to be put in that context as well. Another issue, of course, is who's in charge here? That's a really difficult question because as financial advisors, we're very well educated. We think that we should be in charge. And kind of we should. I already said that we should, right? Come on, Catherine, you said that 2 seconds ago. We're in charge, we're allowed to ask these hard questions. But at the same time, the happiest clients are going to be the ones who think that they're in charge. So how do we manage that relationship to help them to feel empowered? And of course, the most complicated ethical issue when it comes to especially psychological tolerance for risk is family groupings. Couples, hard enough. Joint assets, for example, one SMSF with 3 investment properties in it, and the husband traditionally will be, say, a growth investor and the wife traditionally a moderate or conservative investor. Sorry for the stereotypes, but that's the way it rolls often. That's hard enough, isn't it? To somehow then justify our advice, the fact that our advice is serving one of the couple's risk profiles and not the others, and balancing that out. But it becomes even bigger picture as more of us elite financial advisors that are in this room move on to specialising in even more complex advice for even bigger family groups. How does that work then with family offices, for example, and managing intergenerational wealth? So these are some ethical issues that we all need to consider when it comes to profiling of our clients. Risk tolerance. So next we're going to talk about risk capacity. And this is the bit that you will all love because there's no more touchy-feely. We've done that. Now it's cold, hard, quantitative analysis. So now we can actually argue properly about this because we can say, I don't think that that should even be included or that should have more weight or less weight. So this is a really, really important part of the risk profiling process because of that. And if you ask any of my peers who are academics in Europe and they specialise in personal finance, they tell me, Catherine, the fact that you even consider an individual's psychological tolerance for risk is so outdated. All you should look at is how much risk on paper can that person take. It doesn't matter about their psychology. This is coming from academics, highlighting once again how separate the ivory tower is from the actual world. That's what I get from talking to them. I just think, yeah, you've never sat in front of a client, that's why you say that. And it's great. It does contribute to our discussion. We do need this, and you'll see how much fun it can be to calculate. But it's very different to psychological tolerance for risk. So in risk capacity, we have two components. We have human capital and we have financial capital. Now, human capital generally decreases as we age because it's a measure of how many years to retirement, our education level, our seniority level, and seniority. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. Depending on your nuances, you can include some other things. I think for some of the product providers that I work for, they include other components based on what their particular clients look like demographically, not physically. That would be great. Next level. And so human capital, when we calculate it, it generally decreases over time because it's our ability to earn an income. And naturally, at age 60, one can only earn so much until retirement compared to at age 20. That just makes sense. Financial capital generally increases over time, we hope, because that's just the incremental saving of assets, investing and accumulating wealth, which we hope occurs, especially within our client base, throughout their lives and does increase year on year. So that one's pretty easy, financial capital. It's pretty much just net assets, I suppose, to some extent. So let's do a human capital calculation. You'll need your pens and papers, and we'll do it together. So the first one we'll do is education. If you have a bachelor's degree, give yourself a pat on the back or equivalent. That's amazing, an incredible achievement, and you get 3 points, so write down the number 3. If you have a master's degree or above, give yourself another pat on the back because that's also an incredible achievement, and you get 10 points, so you can write down 10. Next is years to retirement. How can I talk about this without being ageist? A lot of the research we do is just, yeah. Anyway, you get 1 point for each year until you're 67. So if you're 47 now, write down 20. And you can do the calculations based on your age and 67. The next one, the hierarchy. If you are junior in your position, whatever that means, think of it as you want. You get 5 points, and it's amazing you even have a position, so well done. And if you're... That sounded really bad, didn't it? That really sounded like you're lucky to even have a job, because you're so useless. I'm so excited to see the evaluations after this. Catherine said we were all useless and shouldn't have jobs. In the age of sound bites, it actually could end up like that. And give yourself 10 points if you're senior. Well done for that. And years of experience. So if you've been 10 years in the sector, you get 5 points. If you've been 20 years in the sector, you get 10 points. And just give yourself any number of points if you've been less than 10 years, any that you like that are less than 5. Say a point for every 2 years. Everyone got their number in their head of what your number is in terms of human capital? Excellent. So, who gets above 40? Raise your hand. Oh, you legends! Wow. What a room. Oh my gosh. Wow. How incredible. You guys are amazing. And even the people who got less than 40, you're incredible too. Do your evaluation now. No, but you are all incredible too because you all got some points from that survey. There are people out there, some of your clients, who would be well below 10 on any of this. Yeah, so you're doing well. You're doing really, really well. And human capital is our measure of being able to bounce back in terms of us as an individual. Bounce back ability. Is that a word? Could be. It is now. Bounce back ability. No, there could be something better than that. Think on that. We can coin some cool word for that. Ability to bounce back, but that sounds sexy. Resilience isn't sexy. What about resilience ability? That's even worse. Sounds like I can't speak English. Sounds like I went to Byron Bay High School, which I did. Oops. We didn't get taught grammar. We didn't. Skipped. So that's your ability to bounce back from financial shock. So in terms of this research, your human capital in this room is so high that you could all be invested, as I am, only in Nigerian oil stocks. Because when they crash, which they will, you'll lose all your money, but you're so awesome that you'll just bounce back. Because you've got the education, you've got the experience, you've got the seniority, and you have enough time frame before retirement to bounce back. So this measure, it's very quantitative, there's no touchy-feeliness about it, but you can see that it's really, really important for all of our clients to figure out what their, in general, ability within themselves to bounce back is. And the next part of course, capacity to take risk is the financial side. So, we have to combine that with the human capital. Now we do the financial capital. Again, I need you to figure out your number. And this is net, of course. How many years of retirement funding do you currently have? When we say retirement funding, first figure out how much do you need in retirement. Might be like me, which is $320,000 a year tax-free. It could be less. I have expensive tastes. So the first question is how much you need in retirement. Write that down. Now figure out your number, your multiple, how much of that net you actually have. So if you need 100,000 in retirement and you have $1 million in assets, your score is 10. So everyone written down their number? Uh-oh. Dun-dun. Financial capital, this is where you're at. If your number is less than 10, you just have lower financial capital. But there's a very good chance that if you score lower financial capital here, you scored very high human capital before. A very good chance. And similarly, so we can see how that, and it just works out like that, doesn't it? So if you have higher financial capital now, it's probably because you are older, more senior, you've saved more, but it means that you have less earning capacity for the rest of your working life. So it does balance out. This measurement catches those people who kind of slip through the cracks, who have low financial capital and low human capital. It also catches the people who, like everyone in this room probably, or a lot of people in this room, have high human capital and high financial capital. Because think about, just quantitatively speaking, how much risk you can take in your investments if you have not only within yourself the ability to bounce back, the resilience, it's not that bad a word, but also just the financial resources, that even if all of your Nigerian oil stocks do go bust, you still have something left. So this is something that's very, very interesting for your application with your clients. And it really can be very powerful, except that people are not numbers. So I've put up the ethical issue there, one of the ethical issues as quantitative reductionism, reducing people to their capacity to take on risk based on their human capital and their financial capital. It's a bit brutal in my mind. There's a role for it, a very important role, but I don't believe that we should only do that, although my academic colleagues in Europe will strongly disagree. And one of the ways that we can potentially use this component of profiling our clients' risk tolerance is to silo, help to use this kind of numbers within risk capacity, just to silo based on different goals, different assets that the clients have, just to overcome any of the psychological issues, self-control, for example, or even overly optimistic clients who also have equally worrying issues for financial planners, although they're great fun to be around. Next, we're going to look at risk needed. So the first group of people are the people like me who do psychological tolerance for risk. We're the psychs. We like psychology. We have a background in psychology. The next group are the academics in Europe who only want to look at risk capacity. And this group are the investment advisors, the investment analysts who only want to look at, well, how much risk is needed to achieve the client's goal. And so, as you can see in this session, we're combining all of those together. So this one, you all know it. It's a basic calculation. If this is your goal, this is how much you're putting in, this is exactly how much risk you need to take in order to achieve that goal within that time frame. It's quantitative. It's really sexy if you like that. I think the psych stuff is better, more fun. But this has a really important role, especially if you're working with someone, with a client, who has high human capital, high financial capital. They don't even need to take a risk potentially with some of their goals. So it doesn't really matter if their risk tolerance says, yes, they're happy to invest only in Nigerian oil stocks and surf in Porto Escondido. That's not even relevant. If the risk they need to take to achieve their goals is like a 2% return, this becomes so important, doesn't it? Because why would we take any risk that's not needed, regardless of all of the rest? It becomes a question of our egos, I think, as professionals, as people who help other people is, well, I've helped them more. Yes, maybe, but consider this. Consider how much risk your clients actually need to take. So now we're going to have a little pair activity, a little discussion. We've gone through the 3 components of risk profiling. We've gone through psychological tolerance for risk. We've gone through risk capacity, human and financial capital, and we've gone through risk need. How much weight should each of them take? Is it 33, 33, 33? This is up to you to decide. So we're going to have just 3 minutes for each of the pairs. Please, if you don't have a pair, buddy, please move next to someone or turn around, because this is very important to get your discussion on this, on the weighting. All right. Let's be little foxes. I want to learn that. Who's that? Who's got that skill? Could you teach me in the break, please? I'll trade you for a journal article on this. That's fair. Thank you. I really want to learn it. All right, I want to hear, how should this be weighted? Because it's all well and good for a nerdy academic like me to say, but really, you're laughing because I'm not a nerdy academic or because I am, and I just own it. But many of you in the room are actually sitting in front of clients. You are the ones who are developing the strategies right now. Not like me, I was developing the strategies when the dinosaurs walked the earth. I haven't sat in front of clients for a decade. That's a long time. So I would love to hear, what are the results? What do you think? What are the weightings that you guys came up with?
Well, we are 2 different backgrounds. I'm a lawyer. This is the financial planner. So I went 60 for risk capacity, 20 for risk tolerance, and risk needed.
60, 20, 20 with risk capacity as the main one.
I went split equally.
More equally as with a financial advisor hat on. Interesting. Interesting. Who would like to share their results? What weighting they think is most important? 40, 20, 40 from Robert. Psych capacity and 20, 20, risk need gets 20.
40, middle 20.
Oh, wow. 40, 20, 40. Interesting. I won't tell the European academics.
We have a different practice, so our human capital, it's timeless because we deal with families. So we're more about their values, principles, and process and educating that through generations. So I don't even know where that fits.
If you were looking at a family unit and determining the risk tolerance of a family unit, what would the weighting be?
Because we could be working on a 100-year plan.
Regardless. Does their psychology come into it?
Is education and psychology the same?
Don't know. Not sure.
And it's not right or wrong, is that you could have 6 children, 3 of the Nigerian oil people, and 3 are term deposits. So you've got to work that one through.
Yes.
Oh, I'm not saying that's not the answer.
Let's hear some more ideas.
Would it be fair to say that most clients will transition through this and that it will change as they go through different life stages?
Absolutely, it will change. Thank you for circling back to what we talked about earlier. Absolutely, it will change. As they age, their financial capital should surely go up. Human capital should surely go down. Absolutely, for example.
Against their needs.
Yeah.
At the time, their needs come to change.
Absolutely. The risk need will also change. Absolutely. So, did you come up with a weighting? Because
For a current situation, I'll be 10, 10,
10, 10, 80.
80.
Are you CIMA or CFA? CFP. Beautiful. Love your focus.
Oh, probably 2020-60, the reason I said this,
2020-60.
yeah, in the end, clients are contracting our services to reach financial and lifestyle goals. So the thing to me that overrides everything is pursuing the goals. And so if you've had the conversations and you've set the goals well, you've had enough of the conversation, risk needed would have to have the highest weighting because that's what you're pursuing as a goal. But the others are very important, but I don't know what the,
Absolutely. So the gentleman down here is saying, well, it's 2020-60 because it's all about the client's goals. And the last one, the risk needed, is about the client's goals, basically. It's what risk do they need to take to achieve those goals. And many of us these days are goals-based advisors. So, or anyway, we still achieve clients' goals even if we don't use that term. So, yeah, fantastic. Thank you for pointing that out and batting for the CFA people.
work out the psychology, they'll be buying that car every weekend, and then the risk needed has to go up. It'll be too late to do it.
A point here about if we haven't figured out the psychology, then that will adapt the rest as they sabotage the plan week on, week out. And up the back, would you like to share?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we discussed it in the first category, some might need to be a little bit fluid. Because you do, as you learn someone, they need to follow the motion of their stuff. Those parameters can change a bit. But I agree that 2060 is a bit of fluidity in the first one.
2020-60 and a bit of fluidity in the first one, and they do change absolutely over time. You go, and then you in a second. Sorry. 60-30-10. Oh, I like that. It's a bit different to what everyone else is saying. Absolutely. And is there something about your business or your experience with clients that leads you to that perspective?
I guess the nature of the business is medical insurance claims and complicated, tends to be taken care of instantaneously. Psychological is the highest hurdle because you're dealing with high emotions and high mental factors, so it's hard to discern what they want to do with the capital in the time they want to do it and how much risk they take.
Absolutely. Thank you for that focus. Absolutely. The quantitative side almost takes care of itself, it was the comment.
I think with the risk needed, so we were similar, 60, 20,
60-20-20.
20. It's important to remind the client when they don't need much risk and they're comparing themselves at the golf course with what their mates have got, that they need to tell their mates they don't have enough money and they've got more. That's why they've got lower risk needed to achieve their goals.
Fantastic point. The gentleman said, it's our job to remind clients when they don't need to take as much risk. And when the clients are comparing to their friends at the golf club and saying, oh, You know, their friends are saying, well, we're taking this much risk and we're getting these kind of returns, that we can train our clients to say, oh, well, you'll get there one day. To the point where you don't need to take that risk anymore because your risk need is so low.
No one ever says, I'm taking more risk to get that return though. Right? They're taking less risk to get that return. That's their perception.
Uh-huh.
So when they're comparing, I talk about loss aversion. Right? Now, loss aversion has two sides. First side is we assume that means I want to take lower risk, but loss aversion is also comparable. If I'm getting less return than the bloke next door, I've lost relative to him. So how do I get higher return to achieve that comparable loss? Reduce my loss relative. So we were 20, well, we agreed to 20, 40, 40. Only because, but
20, 40, 40, and we're just hearing about loss aversion, which is another one of the many components of psychological tolerance for risk that we could delve into if we're given the opportunity.
sometimes, if someone's, for example, a balanced investor, at the time, you might not want to invest in balanced option pools. Right? So you can say, well, still have be a particular capacity, but the circumstance means I'm not going to invest in that way for the time being.
Absolutely. They might have a short-term goal, for example. Yeah, so regardless, it all becomes important. I've noticed that no one's actually said, kill that one, because at some point it all becomes a little bit important. And it actually, I feel like the theme from this is actually that we maybe need to re-weight the importance of each of these three components depending on the client in front of us even, which is like mind-blowing. Wow, you guys.
What are we doing with this data? Like, what weight should each of these components have? For portfolio construction, for long-term strategy?
Absolutely, for everything.
What is it that we're doing? So a lot of the time for portfolio construction, I don't really care about your psychological or your emotional response to volatility.
Cheeky, but you will care after this session, won't you? He said yes. He said yes. I got it. Training of the client. Absolutely. Absolutely. Hand-holding, and don't worry, we're in this together. Let's walk side by side. Education. We can call it education. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, like with everything. It depends. Peter, did you have something you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'd love to see a study on the alignment between our responses to that, our own behavioural natures, because I think there is a significant influence of the way we ourselves behave and how much weight in particular we put on risk people.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. I've got a great challenge for all of you, in fact. You know your risk profile. Do your normal risk profiling process that you take clients through and figure out your risk profile. So you're one of 5 words associated to you probably. Now take all of your clients and find their average risk profile. And then do that for all the other financial planners you know, especially in your firm. If you're within a firm, control for age if you can, and other demographic variables, wealth, financial capital, human capital. And see what happens, because I've posed this challenge to a firm before and they've said, we've got 5 high growth advisors and the average risk profile is high growth. And we've got 1 conservative advisor and his average risk profile of his clients is conservative. We're influencing exactly what's happening. We are unconsciously influencing this. So other firms have done it and said, no, we're clean. So, and that's not a public thing. You can just do that privately, just as your own reflection tool. The ball never lies, as my golf coach always used to say, unfortunately. So that's a nice quantitative analysis you can use to determine the impact of what Peter has just shared. Thank you for bringing that up. Now let's consider the ethics of this. So there's a couple of points that we couldn't consider, especially in terms of risk need. For example, they need to take risk, but they don't want to actually get rid of something that they own, endowment effect. Or a sentimental shareholding. They want to own BHP because their granddad worked there when they were a coal miner or something. These impact the calculation for risk need. They impact everything that we do. Some of these ethical components. Next, this is not in the app. Please write it down in your pen and paper though. This is again for benchmarking for you, cohort benchmarking. We're going to be revealing the survey results from those 544 other financial planners who've completed this survey from the Portfolio Construction Forum. Which do you use? So revealed preferences. If you don't know what it is, you don't use it. Same with sensitivity analysis approach. Or a risk tolerance questionnaire. And you'll be quite surprised, I think, by the cohort results. Has everyone written down their 3 answers for this? Yep. Excellent. So this is a 7-point scale. And we've only got an average from the cohort of 3.5 for the risk tolerance questionnaire, which I don't know if there's the phrasing of the question confused the people, for example, or maybe it meant do you use an external one versus the old AMP one that's been recycled by every licensee for the last 45 years. I'm not sure. Nothing wrong with that. The law only says we have to do something. So long as you do something, you're ticking the law. No one is in this room because we want to follow the law. We're in this room because we want to be much better than that. We're professionals. So we can see that almost no one is using revealed preferences, which is very, very intriguing. That's True Profile, I think, are one of the people who use that. So when you're thinking about how deeply you want to go into this world of risk profiling, these are kind of the 3 components. So if you're currently at risk tolerance questionnaire, you can see what that progression looks like for you. And we'll also go through a few of the providers, the product providers in a minute with my 65 conflicts of interest, so that'll be fun. And now let's move on towards the communication of this to clients and communicating in general. A lot of what has been raised so far from you is around that. It's around how do we actually navigate this with our particular client that's in front of us. Did it get you? Yeah, wow. Marketers actually know where our eyes go and what we read first based on font size and location. How are we using this in our businesses when we communicate about risk, what risk is even, as was raised very early in this session, what that means for them? All of these little insights that really help us to apply what we're learning here into our actual practices, because it's about how we communicate that's so important. So some ways that we can communicate this, of course, is repeated reminders to our clients in terms of why they're invested the way that they are. And also to keep in mind this fluidity that just came up again and again. I was so impressed by you guys. Incredible. Just in terms of every single client might actually be different in front of us. And even if we go through that full nerdy process that I just took you through, still to have that conversation with clients and see what actually comes out of that conversation with them for that real insight, and to value what they say as well as what they write on the survey and what their capacity and need is. Another interesting tool to use with clients and communicating is around cohort benchmarking. As you know, your clients often say, "Are we doing okay?" What they mean is, how much money do our neighbours have relative to us? That's what they mean. And part of your job is to tell them, you're doing pretty good compared to everyone else who I see in your age bracket or everyone else in the community. You're doing pretty good. I'm going to help you to be even better. So that cohort benchmarking, helping people to understand where they sit and that it's nice to be different and it's also nice to be normal, whatever that is, balanced profile or something. And also to consider those silos and to help clients to understand that sometimes we do have silos. We take different amounts of risk for different goals. So that's some of the ethical communication tools. Now we'll have a quick analysis of, these are some of the tools on the market. If there's an asterisk, I have a conflict of interest there. I'm surprised. I could have picked 6 that I have an asterisk on, but I tried to be a little bit impartial. Because I do work in this space. I've done research on risk profiling since forever, feels like, and I love it, as you can tell. So basically, leader, one of the leaders is Finametrica. I showed you one of the survey questions that's available on their website if you dig deep enough, that bell curve one from the start. And they're very popular. If you haven't heard of them, I'd be very surprised. And they're fantastic. They don't do the psych stuff as far as I know, but they do everything else very well. And Capital Preferences is another option. They do a very heavy quant approach, and they do it very, very well, incredibly well what they do. Moneymind.app is the website for a tool that we've just launched this week. As you can see, it's very much focused on the psychological tolerance for risk and the stickability as well, looking at those components, stickability, optimism, and the other psychological components that help you to navigate a client relationship, but it's not exactly like a Finametrica that's going to say now it needs to be 27.25% in this particular asset class. They're a bit different. There's also Amplify by Adventure Wealth. They're based out of Switzerland, but they're launching in Australia as well. And a leader that we all know is Oxford Risk, which also cover many of the components that we've talked about, if not all, actually. So this is a little overview so you can see you've had the ability to benchmark yourself, and this is giving you a path for what kind of tools are there actually out there that you might be able to request demos on or build your own even. How cool would that be? So bear in mind that things change. I've just shown you those amazing providers for now, but things change. Technology changes. There's a lot of chitter-chatter about AI, and I'm not going to talk about AI in this session really, but just to put it in context that you have learnt what's here now based on all of the research that's come before us, but whatever comes in the future, we're not really sure about. So what we do know though is that you can take away some things from this particular session. You can communicate to clients, for example, about the different components. You can actually implement some of the ethical risk profiling processes, which you probably already are. You can reach out for a copy of the slides, there's my email address, and for a demo of MoneyMind if you're feeling so inclined. And there's also, if you want to go into more depth on this particular topic, I've developed a more academic perspective for the Portfolio Construction Forum. So if you want to get your teeth into it a little bit more and you say, but where's the academic research on this? Then that's the place to go to. And so what we've gone through today, we've gone through the 3 components of risk profiling. We've gone through the really fun psychological side, we've gone through the even more fun risk capacity side, and the possibly crowd favourite of risk need. We've also looked at communicating these different components to clients and how important that communication is, potentially even more important than the actual process that you do if that's possible. Your clients need to understand what you're doing so that they can feel empowered and actually apply it. And this helps not only those advisors who are seeing clients, but also the portfolio construction experts that are in the room, because we need to match, regardless of whether we're seeing clients, we need to match the amount of risk in the underlying assets to the amount of risk that the client is actually happy to take. We need to find that balance. We need to make sure we don't have too many Catherines who say, well, this is my ability, this is my risk capacity, and this is my risk tolerance, and then almost go and die. And I did actually piss off a lot of people in my family by almost dying in Mexico. And I will do it again, but I will be ready this time. I will match my risk profile with my actual underlying investments, so to speak. And the key lesson that has come through all of this is that risk profiling is actually very essential for ethics in financial advice. So connect on LinkedIn, please. And in the meantime, this is where you can get the further meatier version with all of the academic literature. So now we're going to have time for 1 or 2 questions before we completely wrap up. And you're welcome to put the questions through the app, or I know a lot of you have very powerful voices. We also have roving microphone. So you've got so many options. And I welcome all questions. Hi, Nicholas.
Hi, I have a loud voice, so you should be able to hear it.
Can we hear Nicholas up the back?
Awesome. Risk profiling at scale. So, for example, we heard the minister this morning say that super funds will be providing much more advice than the current advisor base. So they have limited time, nowhere near the same. This is going to be loud. Nowhere the same conversational ability of, say, normal funds. How does that work at scale?
How does risk profiling work at scale? So, in my opinion, this type of system, imagine a Phenometrica type system with my type of system with the full psychological package as well. That can be used at scale by an advisor who is wet behind the ears and day one of their actual being an advisor, in theory. They should be able to be used at scale, absolutely. A good tool, in my opinion, will pull everything together and actually prompt the advisor to say, this is a little insight about your client, and the ways that you can have conversations with this particular client is by asking these particular questions. When you're developing a strategy for this particular client, you need to take into account these particular things. So it should be able to be built into the system, and it is built into my system, it should be able to be picked up and worked with any advisor, even a super fund advisor, at scale. Should be able to be done. And is being done already. Other questions?
Just with human capital, I found I've got a client that, and I've got other clients as well, that not only are working for their own life expectancy, they're working for their intergeneration, for their children as well. I've got a client that's 102 and he's still buying shares because he's working on his legacy for his children and grandchildren. Just want you to comment on that.
Absolutely. So thank you for highlighting the core message that came from this room, which was that adaptability and the fluidity, and having a system yourselves which might have those three components, but where you can manage it, the weighting of each of those components based on the client sitting in front of you. I did not expect you guys to come up with that as a group. I'm really blown away, so thank you for that. And in terms of intergenerational wealth in general, I'm glad you brought it up, because my Aboriginal friends tell me that their role is to be custodians of the land for their grandchildren's grandchildren's grandchildren. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Very cool. I don't think like that. How did I not get this message from my family? It's very weird. I feel like I missed out. I've also got some very highly wealthy, ultra wealthy friends from Europe, and their goal is that they need to make sure that they leave this life with enough money for the next 6 generations, which is exactly the same as my Aboriginal friends. So this kind of, the intergenerational vision is something that the traditional older cultures carry with them and actually put in place, and we'll find in all of our clients from those older cultures. And of course, the risk profiling is completely different, isn't it? And also the recommendations. Absolutely, thank you for bringing that up.
I don't think I need that. Where do you think, given that you're probably the bee's knees on all this stuff,
Bees knees.
where do you think the science of risk profiling intersects with something the minister said, the litigation risk? And this is being used as a tool to mitigate litigation risk, where really it shouldn't be about litigation risk. It should be, as you said, not so much about literacy, but about education. There must be an intersection somewhere, because older and deeper cultures are doing this for multi generations, but yet we've got 800 years of Anglo-Western thinking that segregates you, your money, and your money, and your money, and your money, as opposed to family pooling. Where do you think it intersects, or is there any research on the intersection?
So the intersection is something that we could have a whole other session on, I think. I think maybe we should talk about that in the break, because I am completely out of time. If anyone would like to talk about that intersection, please stay around afterwards. And I don't want to go over time, because you get a smack on the bum otherwise.
Awesome. Catherine Hunt, everyone, thank you.